trade war, trade rhetoric, or simply tactics from Art of the Deal. Regardless of what you believe, does this help one nutritional supplement retail chain more than others? So hopefully you guys didn't shut off from that initial introduction. If you are somebody that watches the news or reads anything around the news, regardless if it's financial or not, you tend to hear a lot around this trade war that's happening between us and the Chinese. Because I focus a lot of my attention on consumer packaged goods and particularly a lot of the categories that happen to fit within maybe nutritional supplements, I thought it was important for us to look at some of what has recently happened in the news lately around tariffs, around the trade war, and how that can affect three largest supplement retail chains. So who I'm talking about here is GNC, Vitamin Shoppe, and then Vitamin World. I will add some commentary at the end of this video about some other retailers, some other sales channels that happen to sell nutritional supplements. But the focus of this video will be primarily on those three retail names that I just mentioned. So since this video does surround tariffs and trade talks between the US and China, if you aren't familiar at all with the subject matter, would guess it's pretty hard not to have heard some things here or there. But I'll pop up one of these videos here for you guys. I did a video in early August before this kind of all started around some consumer packaged goods categories and how proposed tariffs could affect those categories. But over the almost year at this point since early August, things have been kind of relatively stable for the nutritional supplement industry in terms of the tariffs. Many of what was on list 3 of the tariffs that were items associated with nutritional supplements have been subject to a 10% tariff, I think, since maybe September. So the industry has been dealing with that. The industry has been figuring out ways to kind of get around that. But all of this kind of changed when trade talks started to kind of fall apart in early May. And that list 3 went from 10% to 25% with materials, I think, that land after June 1st. So obviously a big change that happened. According to the Natural Products Association, a trade association that happens to deal with the natural industry, nutritional supplements, a bunch of different ancillary categories, they submitted an exclusion. They were granted that exclusion. I think it starts June 30th. But they're constantly kind of in talks with our government, trying to figure out ways to make sure that the nutritional supplement industry is not hit hardest by these tariffs. And kind of one of the big areas right now, one of the big focuses right now is that a list 4 had come out, and that list 4, this list 4 has more items associated with nutritional supplement industry, and based around current talks and things that are happening between the US and China, the assumption is this could go straight to 25% and could cause a lot of challenges within the nutritional supplement industry. And I want you guys to remember, and maybe I'll cover this in another video, but this is not just going to be something that retailers have to deal with. The consumer is going to have to deal with this. The brands all through the system is going to feel these tariffs. But in this video, I want to cover how this is going to affect three biggest supplement retail chains. What I want to try to answer here is that, does it help one over the other? And help is kind of a bad word to use. Does it hurt one of them less? And I want to look at this from a ton of different angles like I usually do in these videos. So the first one I want to look at is just like overall spending power. So all three retailers have struggled to regain top line revenue growth. They've all struggled with trying to make sure they have their fair share of the market growth. So as these tariffs kind of work through the system and get applied to, higher cost of goods from the brand side, the brands need to then pass it on to the retailers. It eventually then goes to the consumer. And nutritional supplements, for the most part, are non-essential purchases for most people. The vast majority of consumers, these are non-essential purchases. So based around consumer spending budgets, they might not choose certain products that they believe maybe don't work as much, maybe cost too much, maybe they don't really need. They'll get it with food or some other items within their lifestyle. So overall, out of the three retailers, there's not really a clear winner in all of this. Strategies would need to be changed merchandising wise, or maybe private label creation, pricing changes for any of these retailers to essentially be able to be positioned to win against the other two. A second one I want to look at here is operating margins. Margins have been a struggle lately And anything rising on the cost side is obviously going to create a lot of pressure in that area. And this is this question around, does the retailer, do they eat those margins, not increase prices? Do they push back on vendors to make sure that they're not increasing their prices? Or do they pass those price increases to the customer? So this has been something I've been watching very closely with brand side, the public companies, the CPG portfolios that disclose information publicly. And just about all of them have been increasing their pricing over the last couple of quarters. That price increase has created some issues around volume declines. That volume lost, I believe, has shifted to kind of lower cost options through maybe the dollar channel or maybe private labels through retailers. So based around that and being able to control their margins more effectively, I think the winner in this subject is going to be GNC and the vitamin world. These two retailers have a much bigger proportion of their private label sales percentage of just total sales. I think GNC is somewhere around like 50%, and then Vitamin World is somewhere around 70%. So if you have a large proportion of private label, you have more margin to kind of control things. You have some more optionality that the Vitamin Shop maybe does not. They're focused a lot more on third-party vendors. Because a lot of their revenue is focused on third-party vendors, they have a little bit more of a complex situation to manage their operating margins. Now, since we're talking about trade tensions between us and another country, important to kind of look at domestic sales, like who's controlling their own destiny within where their base of operations is, who's taking care of business there. And though I don't believe any retailers are really taking care of business properly in the US to be considered a winner, what I'll say is the Vitamin Shop is focused solely on the North American market. And what I mean by that is very much the US market. I think they might still have a few locations in Canada, but they're really focused on the US market. And because they're focused on the US market, they could stay more diligent with their strategic initiatives. They don't have to worry about macroeconomic factors, things that are happening globally. They're going to have some effects to that. Anytime you have a billion-dollar business with supply chains and different things kind of going all over the place, you're going to have some effect to it. But what I'm saying, compared to the other two, I think they have slight advantage in this category. The final one I want to kind of talk about here is this wild card category. I want everybody to kind of remember here that 2/3 of those retailers are essentially owned by a Chinese company or is actually owned by a Chinese company. The Vitamin World was bought in, I believe, early 2018 out of bankruptcy by a holding company of, maybe mispronounced it, Fihi International. And then GNC received $300 million. It closed essentially early 2019 from Harbin Pharmaceuticals in exchange for 40% of GNC. So while Vitamin World and GNC got much needed investments to keep their doors open or reopen their doors, and it gave them a clear line of access to one of the fastest growing, largest nutritional supplement markets in the world, they now face a ton of uncertainty because of these trade tensions. Because I think both of them projected some very aggressive success rates, and now with these extra challenges, it's hard to believe that they're going to have a clear line to success. Now, I will say that I saw a investor analyst report that made some kind of comments around the GNC Harbin deal and how these trade tariffs maybe are going to affect U.S. goods moving over to China. I think it's important to note, at least from my understanding, is that Harbin Pharmaceutical will manufacture GNC licensed goods in country, in China. They won't have to deal with the process of getting that over from International Vitamin Corporation now, I guess, since GNC doesn't own their own manufacturing. So based on retaliatory type of tariffs that maybe are happening on U.S. goods moving over to China, they will likely change that joint venture around to focus much more of their attention on GNC branded goods over maybe some third-party goods. So I believe GNC maybe has a little bit of optionality that analyst was not really considering. But to me, I think the winner here out of all of this is Vitamin Shop. They just don't have to worry about any of this right now. Short-term wise, it just helps them focus on what they need to focus on. They don't need to be worried about a complex subject matter that they don't have much control over. So kind of summarizing this and trying to figure out, is there a clear winner out of those three retailers that is being caused by some of the trade rhetoric? I'm not going to go as far to say there's a clear winner. I would say, if anything, there's just a very small fraction maybe of a winner here. But I think the Vitamin Shop has a slight edge because they can focus a lot on their turnaround plans, their strategic initiatives. They don't have to focus on a lot of this area that maybe is going to be complex. They do have some more risk with their merchandising, but that can change very dynamically depending on what happens, to make sure that they still meet the profitability goals that they have, to make sure they can pay back debt and all those types of things. So I would say I would give it probably a very small percentage of a win to the Vitamin Shop. Do you guys agree? Do you guys disagree? I would love for you guys to comment down below if you guys do have some thoughts on this subject matter. But I did say earlier in the video that I was going to cover some of these other retailers or other sales channels, just so you guys have a little bit of an understanding maybe how this affects them. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on any of these, so these are just going to be kind of quick hitter thoughts on this. First one with like food, drug, mass, convenience. So what I'm kind of focused on here is, because they're focused a lot around like convenience items and starting to establish as better for you, healthier for you, merchandising sections, I don't necessarily think these trade worries directly really affect anything substantially. What I'd be most concerned about, does those trade tensions then create some economic stress to the US market? And I believe then there's this idea of a convenience wheel of death. You guys might start hearing me say that a little bit more in the future here. Concept I kind of threw together that I will be talking about more in the future based around some indicators that I see. Now, another popular one is marketplaces. So I'm talking more like Amazon or Walmart.com. I think because of the massive scale these businesses have, and the merchandising selection that they have within their endless digital shelf, there's going to be some options for any consumer that stumbles on, that's looking for a supplement product. I don't necessarily think there's going to be any trouble for somebody to find something that's within their quality or price purchase criteria. I think also, especially Amazon with their accelerator program or the private label, being that they're really focused on private label, they're going to be able to control and create some low cost options for consumers, because they're cutting out some layers with kind of going directly to manufacturers. If you guys remember, the accelerator is a little bit different because they're actually having the contract manufacturers create the brands as well. It's not just a spec sheet and say, hey, create this for me, and then we'll do all the work with the brand building. They're actually shifting all of that to the manufacturer to build the brand for them. So they have much different price economics. And then finally, like direct to consumer. We're talking about direct to consumer brands here, not necessarily just brands that are selling on direct to consumer. I'm saying just 100% direct-to-consumer brands. So if we're looking at this from a vacuum, we're not considering any other things like rising customer acquisition costs, all those types of things. We're just talking about the subject matter of product costs associated with trade and tariffs. These brands should be able to fare very well because they have more margin built in, because they've cut out all of the middlemen. Now, the bigger those direct-to-consumer brands are, the better off they're going to be, because they also have buying power as well to offset some things. Some of the smallest ones possible will be affected based around some of their minimum orderable quantities. But hypothetically, if we are in a vacuum, I believe that is a brand creation strategy that will continue to flourish regardless. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help support me, make sure you guys hit that thumbs up button on this video. If this is the first time you've been introduced to my videos, would love for you guys to be a part of my community by subscribing to my channel. I upload several videos just like this weekly, and if you guys want to connect further outside of this platform, I do include all of my social media links down below. I just want to thank you guys again for your time. Hopefully I gave you some value in return, and we'll see you guys on the next video.